Ladies and gentlemen, I don't really know where to start with our next speaker. She is a legend. I started off with saying that earlier tonight. I mean, Pauline Hanson was the very first independent woman elected to the House of Representatives in Oxley, and it's fair to say she made a bit of a splash at the time, and that splash is still reverberating around the country. And I have to say that for a lot of people, they look at Pauline Hanson in a new light over the last 20 plus years, because she's proved to be one of the most resilient individuals in this nation. She wasn't someone born with a silver spoon in their mouth. She probably wasn't setting herself up to go into Parliament. She was a small business operator. She was a mum. She's committed to her children and her grandchildren, and she's committed to all of Australia. And I can say that because I've seen how passionate she is about the work and the representation she takes up there in Canberra. Had the pleasure of working with Pauline, working against her on occasion. She won every one of those battles, I regret, but I've forgiven her for making me look foolish. But it's rare that in this country we have people who are prepared to put it all on the line for us. And I mean that in the most genuine sense. She just wants this country to be the best it possibly can be. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Pauline Hanson.
At this point of time, with The Voice, I can tell you it is going to be the most important thing in your life you will ever have to make a decision on. It is bigger than buying a house, your dream home. It is bigger than getting married. You can get out of both of those. But I assure you, if we get a yes vote on this Voice and it's put into the Constitution, a whole new chapter, we will never get out of it. Because once that is done, I'll tell you what will happen. It's just a matter of words, and they're saying, oh, we just want an advisory body to the Parliament to give us some advice on legislation. But it's also, they can prioritise matters of concern or importance to them to put to the government. So what came up the other day was about Australia Day, and Linda Burney is saying, oh no, that's not important. I'm telling you it is. We cop it every year on Australia Day with the protest rallies. That is going to be top of the list, I can assure you, and there'll be change with it. The Voice, if it's not, and constitution lawyers have said, if you actually have, you don't listen to them, and that's even my private legislation that I might put up, I have to actually consult with them. All legislation that concerns the Aboriginal and Torres Strait people, the Indigenous people of this nation, they have a right to actually have a say in it. Do you know that 80% of Indigenous live in cities and urban areas? Do you know that only 20% live in rural and remote areas? So you see, all legislation affects all Indigenous people. So this is the big concern. So once it's in the Constitution, there's no wording to it. Section 51 of the Constitution states that you'll have a whole list of it. Oh golly, there's quite a lot of it. How many in the 51, section 51? I'll explain to you. 51, section 51 of the Constitution explains different things like the government makes laws on coinage, on lighthouses, on postals, communications, and it's just one word, marriage, okay? So then the government of the day can go and make whatever legislation they want to. So when you put it in chapter 129, the new chapter, with the few words they have, you're giving permission to the government to go and make whatever legislation they want to. And part of that legislation, what they could do, is actually form another state in Australia. So they could carve off the Northern Territory. As long as they don't take any other state in part of that, so if they don't carve off anything from Western Australia, South Australia or Queensland, then it doesn't have to go to a vote by the people. Also under this new law, not adhered by the Constitution, they can actually increase the numbers of Parliament, which they have an inquiry going on at the moment. And a couple of years ago, Don Farrell, he actually said to me, do you agree with increasing the number of senators to 14? And I said, no, I don't. I said, we've got too many senators now, I'd rather cut it back. So that's what they're doing. And I can assure you, it will be setting aside an extra 2 senators in every state who will be for Indigenous people only. Or if they take over the Northern Territory, at the moment they've got 2 senators, if they take it over and make it a state under Constitution, they have to have 12 senators. So I want you to think about these things. How many of you know that 50% of Australia is under native title and another 10% pending, which they believe will be passed? The coalition government moved, they had the land councils, now it's the land and sea councils, giving them rights over waters above and below the ground and in Commonwealth waters. So that can also be challenged. So it's very dangerous what we are proposing, what they want us to do. And there's no real definition to it. We're not being told what it is. Oh, trust us, okay? We know what's best for you, just trust us. I wouldn't trust them as far as I can throw them, and I know because I've worked with them. And don't you be fooled by it. Please do not feel emotional over this whole fact, because as I said, and I said it in my speech on Parliament on Monday, I said, I've heard right from the beginning, there was 40,000 years they've been here, then it was 50,000 years, then it's 60,000, now it's 65,000, and I said, and even some people are saying 100,000 years. You know what? I don't care. I really don't care. Because at the end of the day, where do I come into it? Where do you come into it? What's your connection? And to think that it's only an Aboriginal that has a connection with this land. I have a deep connection. I have such a connection that I would actually go and fight for this country. If I could go and take up arms, if anyone wanted to invade this country and take away our democratic right and freedoms and way of life, I would fight to the death for it. That's my connection to Australia. But it's also, what about the farmers? Don't they have a connection to the land? What about the men and women who did sacrifice their lives in the wars to protect us and give us what we have today? What about the migrants that have come here and they love this country and they've, blood, sweat and tears have gone into it as well? What right does an Aboriginal or a Torres Strait Islander or a person who calls himself Indigenous have more right to this land than I do? Because of some connection going back so many years ago? It's about the here and now. And as Carrie said, you can't change what's happened in the past. But what I hear all the time from this idiot who sits beside me in the Parliament, Senator Lydia Thorpe, I think you know who I'm talking about, what a nasty piece of work she is. And the whole fact is, all I see is this hatred, this division, this divisiveness, instead of trying to pull people together. This is not what Australia should be about. And they say, they haven't been recognised. We have now the Aboriginal and Torres Strait flag flying in the Parliament. We never had that. We haven't been asked as a country to accept that. We actually have welcome to country every morning. It used to be the prayers, then welcome to country. No, they reversed that. And I'm sorry, when I'm in the Parliament, that happens, I turn my back on it. And I'm the only one, because Kerry was right. This wasn't their culture. This was Ernie Dingo. This has been, all being brought on by, we've got to feel sorry. And Kerry's right. It's about the stolen generation. And now, if they're not game to take the kids away from these dysfunctional homes because of child sex abuse, or they're not being looked after, the kids are in homes where there's domestic violence and everything that's happening because you're accused of the stolen generation. And I said in Parliament also, what about the stolen generation of the convicts that were forced to come out here? What about the children that were taken away during the war, the Second World War, from England? People have faced atrocities over the years, but this guilt trip has to stop if we are going to be strong and united. We also have to take note of the fact of what has happened in New Zealand. I'm hearing from people all the time. The division that's happened there since they've allocated seats to the Maoris. It doesn't work, and we've heard this week that they're prioritising your health issues based on your race. And that's not right. You know, Sarah was right about the people living in poverty. There's no monopoly on, health issues or, people that are homeless, people living in their cars with their children or caravans or couch surfing. This is a problem faced by all Australians at the moment. And here in your own state, your Attorney General, he claims to be Aboriginal. And you know what your Premier said? Oh, I'll accept a statutory declaration from him. That's okay. Did you know that? Yeah. No. So he said he's accepted it, a stat dec, he can be Aboriginal. And the definition of Aboriginal is to actually be of Aboriginal connection to the land. And then you actually can be accepted by the elders and communities. And the third one is you can self-identify as an Aboriginal. And Kerry is right. When we brought in the referendum in 1967, it's put to the Australian people, that was really to change section 5126 of the Australian Constitution. Because at that time it said that the government can make specific laws for any race other than the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people. That wasn't the founding fathers of our Constitution being racist against Aboriginals. That was put there so they can make specific laws for Chinese and the Afghans and those ones that came here, migrated here to work the goldfields and to deal with the drugs that were brought into the country at that time. That's what that was there for. So the people voted to get rid of it. Now it states that the government can make specific laws for any race. So they actually have that, and they do utilise that in legislation that they make. So it is there for people to actually, for the government to make specific laws if they want to, but they want to enshrine it in the Constitution because once they do that, they implement seats in Parliament. Then they control the numbers in the Parliament with the Labor, the Greens and the Indigenous, and then you have the moderates from the Liberal Party, the wet blankets, the bedwetters, those as well. They're all starting to change. They need to be gone. And they're the ones that's why you will never get it changed back again. So your voice will be gone. So think very seriously about it and talk to people about the truth of what this is going to mean. How am I going? Nearly finished? Finished?
Yeah, the buzzer went about a minute ago.
Oh, okay. Look, at the moment, what I'm trying to get is accountability. I put up a private member's bill for identifying Aboriginality. They didn't vote on that. They denied me the right to introduce my bill on the floor of Parliament, so they've stopped me. I want a Senate inquiry into it. No, they've stopped me as well as with that. So they don't want accountability. I'm now investigating with whistleblowers that came to see me about misappropriation of monies. These organisations, we've got over 3,200 separate Aboriginal corporations and land councils in the country. We spend about $33 billion a year on these Aboriginal issues. The census at that time, first one in 1971, was just about 116,000. It's now at 812,000, and between 2016 to 2021, it grew 25.2%. So it was, they're not. The mortality rate is not shown on the census when the rest of the population only grew by 8% with migrants as well. So a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon claiming Aboriginality, which is not the case. So it's not about money, it's about the people with lining their own pockets, misappropriation of monies, and it's not getting to the Aboriginals. I've been to these communities, I see what's happening, but every time I speak about it, I get held down. But I will keep fighting this fight. I want accountability for the taxpayers' dollars. We have a right to know where it's going. I want to stop the corruption, and the people have a right to know. But to each and every one of you tonight, thank you for coming. I hope, I'm not a career politician, but I speak from the heart. and I'm passionate about what I do. I thank you for those people that have voted to put this woman into Parliament down here under the banner of One Nation. We hope to increase those numbers over the years, because at the end of the day, you will gain from it with true, dedicated passion and honesty from my members of Parliament, and that's what I encourage them to be: upfront, honest, and what you see is what you get. Thank you very much for coming.